All right. Hello, everyone. Stefan here. Welcome to a brand new For Your Success podcast, the podcast for aspiring entrepreneurs and people that want to start a business and already have a business that's successful and want to listen to other successful and inspiring entrepreneurs that already had built a successful business. And today we have a really special guest. We have Justin Lalonde. I don't know if I pronounced the last name well. Justin, I forgot to ask you that, but I hope it's good, right? Lalonde?
Yeah, I saw it. It's
Amazing. Justin is the founder and CEO of paidadvertising.com, which I think is a really good name. So we're going to get into that as well, like the thought of using that name as well. He helps with paidadvertising.com. He elevates thriving brands by simplifying DTC growth, and basically, the person from what I've been seeing also in terms of his content that knows a lot of things about when it comes to meta ads, Google ads, all the good stuff for brands in general. So I look forward to picking his brain in this podcast, seeing where it can take us, and him taking us through basically how he built his successful agency, because he has a great team from what I heard also and what you also told me, Justin. So I can't wait, man. I've been so excited to actually dive deep into this podcast. Thank you, first things first, also taking the time and jumping with us today. I can imagine that you are really busy. And yeah, man. So first things first, to perhaps get started, perhaps you could tell the people a little bit more about, who you are, what you do, and kind of also take us back like a little bit in terms of like how everything started for you, and when you basically got started in the entire online space, and then we can take it from there and see where the call takes us.
awesome, man. Well, thanks a lot for the intro. I think you did a very good job at introducing me. I mean, I'm Justin, the founder of paidadvertising.com. My first language actually is French. I'm based out of Montreal, Canada. So I'm a French Canadian. If you want to call me that way. But that said, which is where the last name comes from, to answer your question from earlier. This said, I've been in the space for about 4 years now. So I used to be, before these 4 years, I was a freelance graphic designer. I used that to make some side income throughout college, where I was majoring in graphic design. And then throughout the last year of college, it was COVID, and pretty much everything was shut down. And I had a lot of time to think. Reconnected with an old friend of mine who had dropped out of his last year of high school. He used to be my best friend, but then we kind of split ways since the moment he dropped out, and came to learn that he was running a social media marketing agency, was making a lot of money doing it. I was 18 or 19 at the time, essentially, when we kind of reconnected, and he was making like 30,000-40,000 a month, which to me was just crazy. And he introduced me to Iman Gotsi, actually, at the time, who then got me into buying his programs. At the time, it was like Six Figure SMMA, Agency Incubator, all these programs were kind of starting to pop off. And that led me to create what used to be Wizzle Media. For our first like 6 months, we were a creative agency, because that's what I knew best. Like, I was a graphic designer. That's what I was studying in. And I just started to now I had one designer who actually, she was in the same class as I was in college. And I just kind of hired her as my first contractor. And that powered me for a couple of months. But then I always had to chase my tail. Like, I felt like I always had to chase deals. It's always like one-time project. Once it was done, I had to chase for a new client. Like, I always had to be outreaching and acquiring. So then I pivoted to marketing services in March of 2021, which is when I decided to go e-com. And I started locally, though, as I know you did also in your own market, which you were telling me before starting this podcast together. But I did the same thing, French Canadian brands, for the first like 6-7 months, I'd say, which I think helped a lot to resonate with that local market.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense, man. And that's a really interesting insight, man. So basically, it's always how someone begins, right? Like getting connected through someone else, or hearing about something, then you jump in it, and then it looks like, oh, like what is this world basically of like the entire online marketing space, and you get into it and get started. So interesting thing. So you didn't actually get started with like e-commerce, right? Like it was like before that, like you did just like local business, in general.
Well,
you mentioned.
I still had a niche. I did graphic design for auditions. Essentially, was like my niche. So I would actually build websites for them. I built the front end, and I knew back then I was building like websites on WordPress with these plugins called Elementor and Divi, which are kind of like front end builders. So I was doing the full like website design on like Figma or Adobe XD, presenting it to the client. They would approve, and I would just like build it in a front end builder.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. And then you went into the market of e-commerce specifically, and you mentioned also, to give people like an idea, like what made you go, like, because you said like 2021, right? That was like during the COVID times, or what was there like a specific reason going into like e-commerce back then? Or
honestly, I'm going to attribute a lot of it to luck. Being in Iman's programs and such, I saw that he was in e-commerce back then. He was more e-com than info product at the time. I know he made that switch a little later, I think that same year. But yeah, I just kind of saw him in that space. None of my close friends who were in his programs were in ecom, and that was one thing. I just felt like I was going to steal one of my friends' niches if I wasn't going into like something different. So I wanted to be unique. So that's why I did that back then. It was kind of starting to pop off as a space. And very, very minimal dropshipping experience on my part. Like I'd bought a couple courses on Udemy back then, and I just always kind of had an interest for it. So it's like, you know what? Let me just give that industry a shot.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense, man. And how did it go after that? Like in terms of e-commerce, like your first few clients to the point like where it actually started running?
Well, if I recall, like in February 2021 is when I took the decision. I'm like, all right, I'm going to start to do half outreach, like with dietitians and graphic design and half in ecom. And I did that for a couple of weeks. And then I started getting calls in ecom. And then at that point, I was like, you know what? If I want to make it work, I have to switch all of my efforts into that space. So like start of March 2021, pivot into that. At the end of the month, within my first 3 weeks, I closed a client essentially. So I closed my first client locally for 1.5K plus 10% of performance back then. And then a week later, I closed my second client for 2K and 10%, which that client ended up being still to this day my highest LTV client. My second client I closed, we worked with them for 28 months, and I think they brought us probably $260,000 or so in value as a client. And it was just an amazing ride, honestly, with these guys. It was crazy. And then it just kind of rolled from there. I think I was closing about 1 or 2 clients a month. So that was a pretty good run rate. And it was me, one media bar that I had hired at the time as a contractor. Funnily enough, my first ever media bar, is also a coach at Educate, just like me now. So it is insane how we kind of met back now a few years later. And yeah, I don't know if there's like something you specifically want me to get into, but that was kind of the start of it.
100%. So I'm really curious to know, because like there's different ways of like what I see and hear people scale. Like for example, with our own agency, we in the beginning with realtors, we scaled a lot in volume, like a lot of quantity. And then I backscaled and it became more of a boutique agency, like less clients, like less volume, but more high ticket clients. Sounding from what you mentioned, like how did it basically go from like those first two clients? Like did you scale more on, like, was it more like the quantity of clients? Did you just end up just going more into quantity, or was it more like the quality that was kept?
Both kind of happened at the same time, I'd say, because my first 2 closes, even the third one had a 10% clause in performance. That luckily, I don't know how, again, I'll really attribute this to luck, but my first 4 or 5 clients, I crushed it results wise. Like they were our first 4 or 5 clients, and all of them, we really scaled them up. I have a case study and a public interview with all of these guys to this day. That was one thing also early on that I did, even though I was new to this space. I knew the importance of testimonials. To do a little bit of backstory, when I was a freelance graphic designer, I did a lot of free work for years, and the only thing I'd ask in return was like a testimonial, which I think allowed me to kickstart my business. Because when I started, although I did not have a lot of track record as a business, personally I had a lot of testimonial mentioning like Justin, my work, what I was doing, so that helped with credibility. So I think most of these initial deals grew up in size, like that 2K plus 10% retainer, my second client. I think within our first like 6 months, that client was bringing in about 8,000 or 9,000 a month. So that account like really grew rapidly. I got stuck, I would say 5 to 7 accounts on retainer for probably our first full year as an e-commerce agency. But all of these accounts slowly rose, which meant we went from, I think we were like, in my first 3 months in the e-commerce side, we reached 12,000 a month. I was at that run rate for about like the first 3-4 months until the performance deals kicked in. And then I got stuck at like 25K at that point. So that was my second plateau, if you want.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. And then how, like, walk us through the journey of like getting to like, because at this time it wasn't paidadvertising.com yet, right? How did you go from that, like doing the 25K with those clients and slowly growing it to like what it now is, like paidadvertising.com? Walk us through that journey.
Yeah, I think all the growth happened really throughout the Wizzle Media banner, which used to be the name. I think what's funny also is that the bulk of my YouTube videos say Wizzle Media. So there's so much traffic monthly on that keyword. I still have to run ads for it, or else like people just get lost on the internet. But I wanted to be more authoritative with the name. I wanted to not just be seen. I felt like every agency now had media in their name. Like everybody just had the extension media. It was very popular because of Emon, I think, back in the day. Yeah. But I wanted to be different. And one of my play also, I knew that the personal brand side of things was growing. I knew that education and consulting was going to become a bigger deal. And I love ecom, but I wanted to start building different verticals within the business, just different industries. And I just thought, what better than having a name that can kind of incorporate all of that? Like really to be seen as the ad experts and to have both an educational and an agency side to it, and in the agency having different verticals to that.
Right. Got it. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, perfect. And so when you when you had those clients, when they were, they were basically on board with you, it was going well and those things. I want to touch upon it just later a little bit more on the service delivery part, because of course the name is paidadvertising.com and the importance of that. So you went from those clients, did you then go ahead and scale like in volume, specifically when it comes to the clients, or did you like, how does that basically look like?
Scaling in volume was my second breakthrough. After I've hit that 25K a month plateau, I got into another program, which at the time, what they told me on that program, they really helped me shape like a new offer. And the guys in there told me like, hey, Facebook ads like is not going to cut it for acquisition. You have to change your front end to TikTok ads. Even though the back end might still be over indexed on Facebook, you have to speak a TikTok. And when I did that, I'm telling you, just acquisition picked up like crazy. The two moves that I did was changing my front end offer to TikTok and hiring a closer at the same time. I went from closing like one client a month or so, which was keeping me stable, to now we close like 4 clients a month, 3 months in a row. And that got me from that 5 to 7 clients on retainer to like 18 clients on retainer at the time. That more than tripled the agency revenue at that point. That was my kind of very big breakthrough, which led to a lot more case studies, testimonials in that time period, and just traction, I'd say, in the space. Like YouTube blew up. Everything kind of blew up in that same time period.
And were there any specific brands that you were like working with, or was it like all around like different types of brands? For example, like we have like jewelry brands, like, just different types of brands that we like work with. Like, was it for you like a specific like sub niche that you work with, or was it like just all around like in general like brands?
All around, man. I wish there was a sub niche, but I think very early on we started getting a lot more apparel and fashion brands, and jewelry was kind of the main two niches we were in. But at the time, I remember having 2 food brands. On top of that, I think we had like some golf accessory brand. We had an eyeglasses brand. So we had a few different brands, but the 70% was still fashion, I'd say at the time.
Okay, got it. That makes sense. So I heard 2 things that you mentioned. One is, of course, the service delivery part. The second thing is the hiring part. Like, what would you say is when it comes down to, let's take the first one, so basically service delivery. You mentioned getting the client's results and getting your first couple of clients also really good results. Like, let's start with like a broader perspective. Why would you say, like, in terms of service delivery and all those things, like how big is the importance of actually delivering good service of clients? Because we have a lot of people, and people that are watching this, they sign clients, they think, oh, it's all about getting the client. But I always say the sale starts when the client like starts with you, when he pays, when he signs a contract. That's when the sale starts, and then the rest, that's where you're going to get your cash flow from, in like the lifetime value of the client, right? The long term. How important would you say the service delivery is, especially like in, when we talk about like brands in general, and how important it is for them?
I think it's the most important part. I even started an initiative last year where I did a lot of marketing material for kind of the consulting side of my business, talking to agency owners more about like just focus on service delivery. For me, going back to that initial client, they would not stick 28 months if it wasn't for good service. There's no reason somebody would have stuck that long if the experience wasn't good. They would have left like pretty much every other agency. They would have churned after 1, 2, 3, 4 months, maybe 5 max, right? They would have been gone by then. Average retention rate for us right now is about 11 months, which I think, all things considered, looking at the average, is pretty good. You asked me earlier, how did I scale? Was it through volume? It was in that time period when we got to 18 clients, but that was also the biggest lesson in my life, because so as much as we tripled business, I lost almost all of that business in the next 4 months. Like early 2020 and in 2022, early 2023 was very eye-opening for me, because that was when all of the good momentum I had built started to kind of pull back from under my feet. We were losing clients, and quite frankly, it was because of results. We onboarded so many people for UGC packages and such, but our delivery times were like super long. TikTok wasn't getting that good results. Facebook had better results. And that just started a bit of a negative downward spiral that I was seeing myself in. So Q1 of last year was about kind of building everything back up. Like at that point, I hired a systems integrator who was meant to come in and really build out the systems and like map out our entire service delivery infrastructure. It's when I hired my team manager I told you about earlier, our client services director. I fired one media buyer, the other one left. So I hired new media buyers essentially at that time. It was like a big rotation in the team and the systems. Kind of everything shifted. Most of the business was entirely different after Q1 2023. And from there, end of Q1 and early Q2 is where I really moved my attention back into acquisition. And we've been able to sustain now these same numbers that we reached end of summer 2022 that we also lost end of that year. we went back to these numbers and sustained it all year long, essentially after that point. So I learned like the biggest lesson in that point was that making money is quite easy. Sustaining that money is hard. Like making money today is not an issue, but making money in 6 months is. So that's the big, I think, name of the game, and service delivery is where it's at. So yeah.
Great insights, man. So let's dive a little bit deeper into the micro of service delivery and that process. How does your process look like for service delivery? Like, of course, like I can imagine, like you look at, you audit, of course, like the brand first, like seeing where they're at currently and all those things. But give us some like golden nuggets when it comes down to like the process of like giving a client like a good service delivery. Like, what is something you look at? What is something you take into consideration? Like, walk us through that process.
For sure. So as you mentioned, well, I think it starts also with the sales process in itself. I do audit every account before taking them on. I realized that so many times I was promising something just with top of mind numbers that a client was sharing with me. And when I looked through their accounts, they either lied or didn't really know their numbers, right? So it wasn't really lying. They just kind of talked and splurged out some numbers that didn't make sense. So I now audit accounts before taking them on. So that's one thing we started last year. Now, from the moment they were on, something that I also looked at, because you asked me earlier if I was more into a sub niche, I realized that that was a bit of a disadvantage to not be in a sub niche. I was like, how can I somewhat systemize my workflow? So speaking of that systems integrator, we also looked through all of our accounts and we're like, all right, what is the one thing I can possibly systemize? And we kind of boiled it down to the creative side. So I realized that creative process more specifically was what could be systemized. The ads part was a little bit more erratic depending on the client's budget and industry and such. But in that same time, I felt like all app platforms started to go in more and more broad. And I was like, this is it, man. Everything seems to be pointing at the ad creative. TikTok needs UGC. Facebook's going broad. The only thing I seem to be able to systemize in ecom is my creative process. So let me just get at it. So what we started doing is I built essentially a system for our research process. So what data sources we look at when a new client comes in. Let's systemize the marketing plan that I call it, and research center, which I build as soon as a client comes in, which is like an aggregate of data is the research center, and the marketing plan is like that explained into words, essentially. So I really build out like almost like an encyclopedia that our team can refer back to whenever a new client comes in. So that's part one of my service delivery process. And then from there, the ways by which I do creatives, which started incorporating AI also in that time period, like ChatGPT really came about. So it was honestly a big blessing, I think, for us in many agencies. So I've got templated prompts to kind of ask questions to the data that we have, because our data is in a sheet. I can export that as a CSV, give that to ChatGPT, ask it questions about my data now. So I've got templated prompts for how to get like ad desires, angles that we can take about. So I'd really say that the way I started thinking about my creative frameworks, that's been systemized. That's our edge. The media buying part, we just simplified it. We run with a very simple broad targeting structure on Meta that allows us to focus more on that creative side.
Wow. So you looked at something, you saw like, okay, so Facebook is going more wide, TikTok is going more, right? So what I'm hearing is you looked at the market, you looked at your clients, what you've been doing, and you set up something that could additionally not only help your team, help your clients, but improve the service delivery overall, and really took the time to build something out. All right, like that's basically eating almost, like I would say, like I'm reading Jeff Bezos now, the Everything store, and he talks about eating your client's complexity, right? And that's basically what it's all about when you hear about your client, basically the service delivery. So one question I have upon that, like there's so many brands that we work with as well that do they do already like YouTube ads, Google ads, and TikTok ads, Facebook ads, and all those things. I can imagine the brands that you work with also like have like a database of already things that they've been doing, accounts that have already been warmed up. Is there a specific reason why you would choose one platform over the other when deciding to go into the process of, hey, we're going to be running your ads, we're going to be doing your ads, and kind of getting started with that? Is that also based on like the aggregated data, or like do you make decisions based off on that to say like, hey, we go with this platform over this one, or we combine them, or like how does that process look like?
I'm still a Meta first agency. Even to this day, I'd say we're very indexed on Meta. So like last year, we just crunched the numbers like a couple of weeks ago. We spent 5.5 million on Facebook, 3.8 on Google, and a little less than $1 million on TikTok. So that said, most of our experience still is on Meta. And when I look at reports from platforms like TripleWell or Northbeam, they speak of all the data they're seeing across all of their stores that use their platforms, which is over 10,000 stores. And you look at that, 67 to 70% of the ad spend of the total industry is on Meta. 25% is on Google. And then you look at it, it's like 4% only is on TikTok. So I think we're also following the market there. Is although TikTok is sexy, although people talk about, as you say, YouTube ads and such, the people want Facebook. And even, again, looking at, I love TripleWell because they released 2 times 100 page of data about like 2023 as a whole and kind of everything they've seen across their brands, Facebook's still leading performance wise. So I'm just where the performance is, quite frankly, with you. And most brands, I'll always recommend going to Meta first. Usually once we have Meta dialed in, we'll add Google to it. And once we have Meta and Google dialed in, then I'd add TikTok as a third channel. But I go by order of, I'd say, ad spend distribution in this space as a whole.
Got it. And when we go a little bit even deeper on that, like, when you say like meta ads, you're starting off with meta ads and doing those things, would you say that there's specific strategies that you would advise for brand owners to take a look at when it comes down to, which audiences to use? Of course, it depends on the audiences that they have, right? And website visitors and everything regarding that. But like when we talk about meta ads and using that first things first, would you say like, TikTok or like YouTube with more, or like Google search ads, which is something that we do as well for like info product companies. We use it like, for example, more as like YouTube is being used more as a retargeting tool for us. With Meta, we do, of course, cold and retargeting as well. But are there different types of targeting strategies that you use for these specific platforms? Do you, depending on the brand, of course, like that's always dependent. But like, are there specific things that you look out for when it comes down to the targeting? Because I think I saw a video of you on YouTube, if I'm not mistaken, or it was a post in your school group. And by the way, it's a great school group to join, school.com/paid advertising. If you guys want to check it out, I'll leave it in the description, by the way. A small promotion. I've got to do it as well in the podcast.
Appreciate it.
Really good group and really good value. What I saw, I think, in one video is that you said creatives are the new targeting.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
So could you touch upon a little bit more on that, and if that also goes for all three of those platforms, or if it's only specifically like TikTok, of course, like that's the main thing. But like, talk us a little bit more like on that part.
TikTok and Meta 100%. Google, no. I think Google is still like very indexed on media buying and targeting and kind of tactics, keyword research. I think that's still its own beast in itself. We could get into YouTube ads and more specifically YouTube short ads and such. But when I speak of Google, I speak less of YouTube. There's a very small portion of e-commerce ad spends put to YouTube. So I don't really speak of it that much. But to answer your first question about what I'm doing targeting wise, both TikTok and Meta, we're going broad. Like I'm not using any interests. When I say broad, it's geographics and demographics that are limited. That's it. So I'd pick, let's say, men or female or both, and I'd pick an age range perhaps, and I'd just pick, let's say, the US as a whole. So we're really going as broad because, number one, I don't want to have to ask myself questions am I picking the right audience or not? Like, for a fact your customers are within that audience. If you're broad, who you're selling to is in that audience. Two, you'll never also face the problem of like, is my audience too small at scale? It's good. It's as big as it can get. And when I say creative is a new targeting, is that I feel like on both of these platforms, after having attended like their quarterly calls that they have with agencies, like Meta has the agency summits they have every quarter. They talk about all their AI capabilities. They keep speaking about the Meta's AI. They literally call it that way, which they say like Meta's AI has access to, I think it's like 40,000 data points about your ad creative. And it's something like when you start looking into the list and you start expanding on that, they can see like, I always give this example of take a screenshot of our conversation right now. They'll know that it's two white men speaking to each other. They'll approximate our ages. They'll know the elements on there, but they'll also know that of you as a user. So if you, Stefan, were seeing me on an ad, they probably know that you react better when you see a male of a certain age, of a certain skin color, and so on and so forth. And they can read textual elements on an ad. They can read the copy and what's on the landing page. So I did a demonstration video not too long ago where I was showcasing an ad. What just me looking into this ad, what I can assume from it based on the person that was used, on the text that was used, the colors that were used, and the landing page. And I was like, look, you've got the demographic, you've got the age approximation, you have essentially a lot of pain points and benefits that audience might relate to, which are interests. So I'm really just of the belief that if you make a creative tailored to somebody at a specific awareness level, they'll find their way, essentially, like Meta will find their way through the broad audience to get you the right people.
Wow, that's something that I also with my students talk about a lot. They say like, oh, like what do you think about this targeting, or what do you think? Some of them do local lead gen, others e-com and all those things. And we say like, hey, listen, just try blank, man. Just no targeting. Like literally. No targeting? Like what? Like are you? What are you talking about? I'm like, dude, like Meta's AI is gonna check everything, and it's basically AI just checking everything on like
exactly.
Just don't input it, right?
I give an example. Like way back then, media buying is the act of buying media and picking the right targeting for the audience you want to attract. Think about a newspaper. All you had to do was pick, number one, you had to pick the right newspaper and to study their audiences. So it was a little harder because that data is not publicly available. Then number two is to negotiate the rates with these guys and make sure you had the best like price for your ad. So that was media buying. And then at that point, once you had that locked in, the copywriter would have to make a very strong and compelling ad, usually under the written form, to convert someone. To this day, it's like this whole act of saying, who do I allocate my money to? It's app platforms. We just spoke 70% of the industry's ad spend is on Meta. So it's a safe bet. And second of all, who do I target? Well, now you don't even have to really worry about that because they'll figure it out. So it's like the only thing that you have to do now is make a good ad. That's all there is. It's just make a good ad and it'll convert.
What are some things you would look at in terms of like creating a good ad? When we go a little bit deeper on that, like what are some things that brand owners or brands in general should be? Because the funny thing is, the call before this, I was talking with someone. He's doing local lead gen for like painting, like with painting companies, and someone else before that also like in terms of personal trainers. And the funny thing is I advised them a couple of weeks ago to do UGC content for their local like lead gen business. Yeah. They did that. Lowest cost per leads ever, best results so far, and they're just scaling up. So but when we talk about like in general like brands, like what would you say is something really important when it comes down to like using the creative? Like what is something to really look out for and to implement?
Well, to just touch on the experience you've had also with these local lead gen people that you're working with, I've had the same thing. I told you earlier before the call that I was building up like these different verticals to not get into the niches because I think it's just going to get saturated if I get into that. I did the same thing. I used what I learned in ecom, used a bunch of UGC, and these guys are just crushing it. Like I'm outperforming all of their past agencies by like 2 folds when it comes to cost per lead because of the content type. Everybody in lead gen is just using statics and like very simple stock footage. So that will be a revolution, I think, in this space this year, 100%. But to get back to ecom, there's this great book called Breakthrough Advertising. I allocate a lot of my success to it. Same thing also for scientific advertising, like Cloud Hopkins. Also another great book. You read those, you start to notice patterns in both books where they speak about awareness of the audience, the sophistication of the market. They speak about mass market desires. They speak about techniques to kind of enhance this desire. But all in all, it kind of boils down to having the right desire, having the right awareness level, and having the right sophistication. So it's kind of the who, the how, and the what. And not in that order, but it's basically what you get from these fundamentals. So what I try and preach now through my videos, through the school community, is just how I leverage these fundamentals in my research process. It's like I'll get the research, I'll try and categorize that research into what are the possible mass market desires that I have, what are the possible questions my prospect is asking themselves at different awareness levels, and how sophisticated is my market in general. And from there, your message gets like tailored through these 3 elements.
Got it. That's really interesting. Because you are someone that's been in the game for a long time, right? Like you're someone that has a lot of experience with brands in general. Where do you see the market going towards? Like when we talk about like the you have Meta now, of course, like 70% of that's been going to Meta. But like where do you see the market going to? Because like 3 years ago, no one was talking about like UGC. No, everyone was doing just like standard like pictures, like some videos and all those things. Now UGC is like the it topic when it comes to that. Well, where do you see it going? Like the years that are going to come, like what do you think in terms of like just the platforms in general, but also like is creative, like that's of course from my perspective still going to be the main thing. It's going to be really important, like using the creative as well. But like where do you see it going like in the next couple of years in terms of like the
well, I just think the targeting part, I think it's not even going to be a question anymore. People are still asking themselves like, should I really trust broad? I quite frankly think you're just not going to have any option. I think they're going to remove everything else in the future. I think they're just going to remove all targeting capabilities and present themselves as an all-in-one solution to find the right customers. They're like, look, we've got the platform, just give us the ads and we'll figure it out. So I think that's going to be the main move. Talking about the creative and how AI is going to have a role into it. Here's the catch. Like, there's been 2 styles of businesses popping off that try and help with AI ad creatives. You have these, there's adcreatives.ai. Facebook also have like generative AI capabilities. It's very basic, man. It's mainly for statics and it's like very, very basic creatives. I don't see us being there anytime soon. Honestly, it's not really good yet as to how to build the right ad. It just lacks context. The second thing that I've seen a lot is these they don't really follow the fundamentals nor really have any good like backbone to it. It's very much product aware ads. It's like, here's the product, buy it now type of ad, and like with the CTA, that's like very, very generic ads that they do. Might work for some businesses, but I think for the vast majority, we're not there yet. So I've seen a few AI businesses popping up trying to incorporate more of these fundamentals in the research and kind of data-backed creatives. But all of them that claim that, it feels like a front for them selling you the same like shitty AI ad creative. So I really just think that when you look at market sophistication, you have your first to market And when you're second to market, you got to like enhance or embellish the mechanism or kind of make it new. Or that's pretty much what they're doing right now. They're just trying to make it into a new mechanism, but it's the same thing. So I don't know. We'll see how that evolves in the future. If there's somebody who's actually able to crack AI ad creatives, but I think for the next 2 to 3 years, we've talked about the importance of UGC for local businesses. I wholeheartedly believe that no matter the space you're in, agencies will have to move towards more of a creative centric approach moving forward.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. So you touched upon like the breakthrough advertising book, which I think is one book that anyone should read that's in the space 100%. Of like marketing. It's such a good book, and especially the levels of like market sophistication in that part. Like where do you think that is at? You know, when it comes to the brands part and all those things. Of course, like I said, it depends on the niche, it depends on everything in that regard. But when we talk about it like broad in terms of the market sophistication, looking at people buying things online, when it comes to e-commerce or whether it be let's talk about e-commerce and info products specifically. Where would you say the market sophistication is at right now? Like which specific level is it right now? What would you say, and what could brands do to really make things happen for their own brand? Understanding that
it'll be very niche dependent, because that's the thing. I'd say when it comes to e-commerce businesses as a whole, like you from an agency perspective looking at e-commerce businesses, they are probably as sophisticated as it gets, right? They've been pitched by agencies. It's a very crowded market. When it comes to each of these niches, I still see to this day people coming out with some crazy ideas that makes them, if not first to market, like second to market. I'd still say there's a lot of people there that there's new markets to emerge, but I'd say the average brand is going to be in either stage 3 or stage 4. So prospects have heard it all. They need to have like either a new mechanism or kind of some form of guarantee, or like a crowded market, which is all about brand. So I think we're seeing the brand part, like the crowded market part, where a lot of founders have to start showing their faces alongside their e-commerce brand, and it becomes like an influencer or a creator first brand. So many people talk about that now, like Mr. Beast building a brand and such. I think now that like when you look at a very sophisticated market, they got to use identification in order to resonate with the brand, which means they have to identify to some level with either the brand's mission, the brand's kind of feel, or the person behind the brand. So I think we'll see more and more founders having to show their faces, which is counterintuitive to a lot of these guys wanting to be behind the screens and behind the scenes with an e-commerce brand. And yeah, I think that creator economy, is already booming from the UGC front, but I think brand owners might either have to emphasize more the branding aspect of the business, so building a stronger brand, and that's hard if there's no face around it, or taking more the easy route and showing their faces out there.
That's such a good point, man. That's such a good point. I really think that's important, because we've been also doing some email marketing through Klaviyo also for some of our clients, and we've actually talked with a couple of brand owners as well, like, hey, why, like, you need to, especially in like the welcome series, like when someone opts in from like the pop-up, we told them like we need to like introduce these people to you. They need to know your story, why you founded it, and why everything's happened. And we noticed when we do that, it actually helps the conversion as well, because people can like resonate more, because usually they created their brand because they were the person that they now want to attract, right? So when talking about that, and I touched upon like email marketing, I know you, and I think I heard that somewhere from you. I don't know if it was you or someone else, but regardless, I think you mentioned somewhere like a holistic approach, right? Is that correct? Like, did you mention like something like a holistic approach in terms of like or using marketing and all those things, like not just looking at one thing, but looking at like the overall picture? I think my CMO touched upon it. He said like, hey man, I watched this video from Justin. I sent him you as well, and he sent me a video from you, and it was like, and when we are in the call now, he uses the term like holistic approach. Like he says,
100%.
We're in Triple Whale sitting with a client, and he says, you know what? Let's not just look at, what this thing, let's just look at the overall picture. Klaviyo is getting us this, this is getting us this, the organic content is getting us this. Let's go take a deep dive a little bit more in that approach. Like, what do you think of like the holistic approach, looking at the bigger picture instead of just only, this is what one platform is saying, but like the overall picture of marketing and paid advertising? That's
a perfect segue into a precision I wanted to make earlier. You asked me where the space is going. I said creative, but talking about holistic, I'd say for me, it'd be creative would be a platform change, a brand change. I think it's just looking at finances. An agency that's doing a very good job at doing that is Common Thread Collective, led by Taylor Holiday. They're doing a very good job. They have their own platform, Statless, and I think they're very finance first, these guys. But I think from an app platform perspective, it's going to be creative centric. from an agency perspective, if everybody does creative, do you start looking at who does better creatives? Like, how do you quantify that? I think it's going to be more of a conversation, as you say, call it a holistic approach, call it looking at finances and the overall business impact. Because then if you start removing all of these elements from the ads manager, you have less targeting. Soft metrics become less important. Hard metrics are like, how profitable is my store? If it's not, why is it? How are all of my ad channels interacting with each other? How's my customer journey looking like? How can I optimize my entire funnel, not just meaning website, add to cart, etc. No, my advertising funnel across all of my platforms to be profitable, right? Looking at MER, blended metrics, those are starting to come more predominant in the conversations, at least that I'm trying to have with their customers, really looking just outside of the ads manager to fix issues. Because so many times I think we're on audits, and I feel many agencies just try and either promise the world or position that. They'll look just at the ads manager and promise so many changes they can make on it. But I always say, like, there's so many more things outside of this that will impact your performance as an agency, and you got to take some form of control over it. Would it be to offer that as a service to the client, like email or CRO or whatever that is, or to at least offer guidance and give them benchmarks as to what they should be hoping to achieve? Like, there's this new software I came across the other day. It's called Veros.com. It gives you, they have like 4,500 customers. It's like their whole business model is benchmarking your brand against brands in the same exact revenue, ad spend range, and industry. So that way you see, like, literally, how are you comparing against the average? Are you above or below? And by how much of a percentage are you regarding the average percentile, essentially? That's great because you can see that throughout all metrics. And to recap my point in short answer to that long answer I just gave is creative and finances, I think, are going to be two things we'll want to look into.
Got it. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Well, what was the one that you said, like Veros? Like how do you type that for the people watching?
VAROS.
VAROS. Okay, so VAROS. Okay, I'm going to.
Yeah, one of my students actually in my private community brought this up, and I was like, damn, it's a very interesting tool. Like, I never heard of it before him.
Got it.
Started looking into it. I'm testing it out right now, and I'm most likely going to make a video on it very soon. I'm still like just playing with the tool and seeing how how accurate or good it is, but. Veros is coming out. Shopify, with their audiences now for Shopify Plus members, have a section called benchmarks, which they benchmark you against other Shopify stores of a similar space. Triple Whale has benchmarks now. I think there's a reason everybody's coming out with benchmarks. They're trying to make it more transparent,
of course,
as to how are you doing and how the back-end data that you can hardly see from an ads library that is public. They're trying to make some of this hidden data more public to people, so you really know how healthy your business is.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's a really good one. So also one thing to touch upon that, like what you mentioned, like I always say, like especially when it comes to brands or info product e-commerce, you can have the best ad, you can have the best creative and everything in there, but if you send people to a broken funnel, it's not going to convert, right? So what are some things that you also assist brands on when it comes to the CRO, when it comes to, like, do you look at, for example, like their products and bundling them with a specific discount on pages? Have you tried like using listicles, like for example, on that? Or do you also look at that part? Like, how do you take a look at those things? And then what would you say are the most like common things that you see with brands? Like, is it usually like optimizing also the funnels, or and then building them also for them with like what I mentioned, like bundles or something like that? Is it the email marketing that you also take a look at, because it's the overall approach? What are some common things that you see with brands and things that they usually need to improve on?
I think one of the biggest factor that influences a lot the ad results that we have is whether or not we're using a dedicated landing page. It could be a listicle, it could be an advertorial, it could just be a landing page built for ads. One, from a tracking perspective, we usually are able to segregate the data and be like, this landing page is specifically for ads. So that helps with tracking issues. And second of all, usually conversion rate is always higher. So a lot of brands will invest into CRO, but they don't realize that CRO needs a lot of statistical evidence in order to become relevant. So they have to have a lot of traffic, which most brands don't, right? They need to attract usually 100,000 visitors a month for it to have statistical evidence when making CRO changes, because you'll go for micro improvements with CRO. It's much easier to build one page and really dedicate your efforts to improving that one page all the time, because most of your sales are coming from that one dedicated page. So that said, recommending to clients specific landing page improvements is something we'll do sometimes. And when it comes to offering these services, I personally don't. I've got a partner also based out of Montreal out here that I just refer clients to whenever they need these services. But every time I've partnered with him, we've always gotten better ad results. So he gets a client, he makes money, but the client always usually gets better ad results. I've never yet had a client that worked with him or with in fact, other CRO companies I've worked with have lower results by using a dedicated landing page than just sending to the website in general. So that to me is the biggest factor. Emails, I don't offer it either. I used to. For a year, I built this department in-house. I had it in that big boom, also revenue. But when everything kind of started crashing, I started to cut some of the stuff and just focus on our core services. Maybe someday I'll get back to it, but I still feel like we can get pretty good results without looking into emails.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. I want to touch upon like the last part of this podcast as well, to like the consulting side of things, and what made you also want to go in that route? Because I think it was like last year, like 2 years ago. I've been having my education business now for like the past 4 years, next to my agency 5 years now, and I saw like the education business also, you know, coming up and communities coming up and everything basically, you know, growing that way. And I'm curious to know like what made you decide to go on the route as well, like next to having your agency, also going to the consulting route and teaching like, you know, brand owners or like agencies or something like that, also these things, because you have so many golden nuggets and things that you offer that I think it's so valuable. So I could understand why, you know, you would choose to go to that direction. But what made you go into that direction, and what are kind of your, you know, your goals regarding that part?
Yeah, well, I think number one, a lot of the time, so on a given month, in full transparency, we'll book about anywhere from 40 to 60 calls with e-commerce businesses only. Not local lead gen, which we've also got like a calendar for that, but just e-com, about 40 to 50 calls for the most part. And I usually pre-qualify these calls and we'll end up taking like 10. And from the 10, we'll usually end up moving ahead with maybe 2 or 3 brands. So that leaves you like 90% roughly of the calls that get booked that are just disqualified. So I wanted to have something to offer these guys that was just the free content, because if it's not for us, they'll go and pay for a solution elsewhere. Like they have money to spend and they want to invest in a solution. It just, do I think we're the best position to do it, or do I just want to risk it and have them work with some other guy out there that might mess up their business? So one, I wanted to find a way to offer something to these guys. Number two, as you grow with your agency, especially publicly as I've been, even though my content is never focused about the agency and the numbers I'm doing, it's always focused about what I do for my clients. It does attract a different crowd. I also attract agency owners that look at my content and are like, damn, how's this guy doing that? Yeah. What is he doing? Like, how is he working with his clients? So I did start to build somewhat of an agency owner following, and even media buyers. I've got tons of just media buyers that are like, hey, I've worked for this agency. I work for this brand in-house. I need help, you know, with this. So it's like, look, I've got marketers, I've got agency owners, I've got e-commerce brand owners that aren't qualified to work with the agency, but they want something. So that's what prompted me to go into more this consulting route and starting to build like a private community that we have to offer some kind of private courses, yes, but also just coaching from a one-on-one and one-to-many basis, and also with my team to kind of loop them into this process. But yeah, that was kind of the factor that got me into that. And also, I mean, we could touch on educate, but that last year too brought a lot of interest around what I do with my agency.
How has that been, man? How has that been, like in terms of like educate and working with, you know, E-Man so close and with the entire team? Like, how has that been?
It's been great. Honestly, it's been very fun as an experience. I wanted to have my feet wet with the agency owner side of things, and which is why I took the gig at Educates in April of 2023. I essentially saw Iman post a story just like, hey, I'm looking for an ads and media buying coach. Was like, figured I was in a pretty good spot to help with that, given also how I think my LTV as an Educate client is like sky high. You know, I've bought every program these guys have.
Me too, man.
So I was like, look, I'm a good customer. And I'm, I think, a qualified candidate for that. Exactly. So they took me on. John Danes actually brought me on, which kudos to this guy. He's been great with me. And that led to a bunch of opportunities. Obviously, a lot of agency owners kind of wanting to learn more from me. But also, I told you I'm going to Dubai. I'm going to meet up with the Educate team to film some new content for upcoming programs. And I'm getting looped in something much bigger that is going to come out publicly in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, this was a gateway for a much bigger step now that I'm about to take, which is very fun and promising.
Amazing, man. Amazing. So great to hear, man. And yeah, man, like I want to touch up on the last thing. So what are kind of your goals with your agency for like this year, and what you want to reach, and you know, what points do you want to achieve with that, and how does that kind of look like, to give people also a perspective of like already what you've achieved is really amazing. And it seems like, you know, when you're doing something, it just build the momentum of it, you just keep on going, you know, good things come to you, like they get attracted to you, and if you stay in the realm of like good people, you know, good things also happen. But like, what are kind of your goals for for this year and upcoming, time to come
For sure.
for the agency?
I've got a few goals. One of them, the local lead gen side, I want to build that to 100 clients on retainer. So that's the goal. I want to build a new vertical with more volume, to get back to what we were speaking at the beginning of this video today. When it comes to e-commerce, now that we have 40 to 50 calls, now that it's not just about getting one client a month, it's more getting like 2, 3, 4, 5 clients a month that we're able to bring on. It brings me to this path where, again, do I want volume or do I want quality? So we've increased pricing a little bit recently, and I'm trying to increase client quality on the e-commerce side to reduce the amount of headaches that come with volume, especially in this space where every deal is custom. So increasing e-commerce client quality, but I'm not looking to increase the amount of clients we have on that. I'm happy. We're always at about like 12 to 15 clients. For me, that's the sweet spot. I love that amount of clients. I just want better clients that also pay more with that. So that's going to be it for e-com, local lead gen to 100 clients. And consulting, I'd want consulting to be a considerable part of my revenue. I definitely want it. I had this goal, like everyone, to build a consulting to like 10K a month. But now that, I've been doing more of it, I'm like, you know what? I think we can reach for a lot more. It was 10K a month was more like the typical goal I set with any new venture I built. But now it's like, okay, let's try and build for some much bigger numbers. And I think with, what's about to happen with Educate and so on and so forth, there's a real possibility for me to really grow the consulting and educational side this year.
Amazing, man. Those are some amazing goals. To end on that note, Justin, is there anything specific you would want to leave people behind watching this? Because mostly people are watching our agency owners, coaches, consultants. That's kind of mostly our audience. Is there anything specific you would like to leave them behind with? It could be in terms of like paid advertising. It could be in terms of just in general something they could take along and use for their own. But anything you would like to leave them with?
Think about your advertising process. Do you just do like every other agency out there? You'll look at similar ads. You get a new client, you look at similar ads. You'll try and make it better and just kind of tweak it around and spin it around. I did that for a year and a half until I realized that there was no backbone. I didn't know why my ads succeeded. We've talked about the importance of marketing fundamentals in this video. Learn them, apply them, and make sure you have a solid creative process. That will be your motto. Like, creative is the new targeting. Get this tattooed on your forehead this year. Like, that's what you need to apply as an agency owner.
Amazing. It's been awesome. Justin, I think we could have talked a lot more. I think I had a couple of different topics as well that I wanted to go on, but like I said, I have a hard stop right now. But I want to thank you so much, man, for taking the time. I really, really appreciate it. And who knows, for the future, we might do one live because we're going to Dubai as well. So we might do one live. Other than that, thank you so much again. And thank you guys also for watching. If you want to learn more about what Justin does, go ahead and look at the links in the description. I think he's one of, if not the best people when it comes down to, being up to date in the market and knowing what he does, whether it be with his agency or ad engine, right? In terms of the program. Yeah. So go ahead and take a look at him and, see what he is doing. For now, I want to thank you so much for watching the For Your Success podcast. It's been a blessing again. Justin, thank you again for having the time and taking the time to be here.
Thanks for having me.
And you guys, thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye.